The grand hall of the neutral space station shimmered with soft blue lights, casting an almost dreamlike glow over the gathering of diplomats. Representatives from different species stood in small groups, exchanging polite words and cautious smiles. The air was thick with the scent of exotic perfumes and metallic undertones from alien atmospheres. At the far end of the hall, a group of humans stood together, their expressions calm but alert. Among them was Sam, an engineer assigned to the diplomatic team. He was not a politician, nor was he trained in the delicate art of interstellar relations. His job was simple: maintain the station's systems and ensure everything ran smoothly. Yet here he was, standing among high-ranking officials, quietly observing. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on a group of Veseri, the tall, elegant beings with pale silver skin and deep violet eyes. The Vesari were known for their refined culture and their strict adherence to hierarchy. At the center of their group stood Lurvana, a noblewoman from one of the most influential houses of her people. She carried herself with effortless grace, her long robes flowing as she moved. Curious about the humans, Lurvana approached them with a confident smile. Her voice was soft, but carried an air of superiority. "It is always fascinating to meet humans," she said, her eyes scanning the faces before her. "Your species is quite unusual." One of the human diplomats returned a polite nod. "We appreciate the opportunity for peaceful discussions," he said diplomatically. Lurvana tilted her head slightly. "Indeed, it is remarkable how your kind is spread across the stars despite your limitations." Sam frowned slightly but said nothing. He had heard this tone before from other species, polite, yet laced with condescension. Another human spoke, keeping his tone neutral. "Limitations." Lurvana smiled, as if she found the question amusing. "Well, of course, humans are physically weaker than many species. Your lifespans are short. Your technology, while impressive, was borrowed and adapted rather than originally developed. And yet, somehow, you persist." She let out a soft chuckle. "It is quite interesting." The conversation around them seemed to pause for a moment. The air grew heavy. Sam's expression darkened. His jaw tightened, and a flicker of something intense passed through his eyes, something ancient and unyielding. He stared at Lurvana, his hands curling slightly at his sides. The Veseri noblewoman blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The warmth in the room seemed to drain away, replaced by an unspoken tension. She felt it, a quiet storm brewing beneath Sam's steady gaze. For the first time, she felt a strange sensation in her chest, a feeling she did not expect. "Fear, human?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Why are you looking at me with anger?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Sam did not shout. He did not raise his voice or make a scene. Instead, he simply turned and walked away, his face unreadable. The other humans exchanged brief glances, then followed him without another word. Lurvana stood there, confusion clouding her thoughts. She had only spoken the truth. Humans were weaker, weren't they? Their bodies were fragile compared to other species. Their technology had not always been the most advanced. So why had her words caused such a reaction? She looked around, expecting someone to laugh, to ease the sudden discomfort. But none of the humans in the hall were smiling. Instead, they had grown distant, their expressions unreadable. The easy camaraderie they had shown earlier was gone, replaced by something colder. One of the older Vesari diplomats, a male with graying hair, stepped beside her and let out a slow sigh. "That," he said quietly, "was a mistake." Lurvana frowned. "I only spoke the truth." The older diplomat shook his head. "You spoke without understanding." He glanced toward the humans, who were now gathered near the exit. "You called them weak. That is not a word they take lightly." She crossed her arms. "But why? Surely they know their place in the grand order of species." The older Veseri gave her a look of pity. "Do they?" He gestured toward the departing humans. "And yet here they stand among us." Lurvana remained silent, watching as the last of the humans disappeared through the doorway. For the first time in her life, she questioned what she had been taught. And for the first time, she wondered if she had made an enemy of the one species she should never underestimate. Lurvana sat alone in the observation deck of the space station, staring out at the endless stars. The silence around her felt heavier than usual. She could not stop thinking about what had happened in the Grand Hall. Sam's reaction still puzzled her. Humans were supposed to be logical, adaptable beings. She had not insulted him directly, nor had she said anything untrue. So why had her words affected him so much? Why had the other humans reacted the same way? She sighed and leaned back against her chair. The older Vesari diplomat's words echoed in her mind. You spoke without understanding. Lurvana did not like feeling ignorant. As a noble, she had been educated in the histories and cultures of many species. She had read reports about humans before. They were survivors, but they were not special. Not in the way the great empires of the galaxy were. Still, something felt different now. The door to the observation deck opened with a soft hiss, and a young Vesari aide walked in, holding a datapad. Lady Lurvana, he said, bowing his head slightly. The humans have declined our request for further discussions today. Lurvana frowned. All of them. Yes, the aide confirmed. They have not given a reason, but it is clear they are displeased. She sighed and waved him away. That will be all. As the aide left, Lurvana drummed her fingers on the armrest of her chair. Humans were social creatures. They rarely acted as one unless something truly mattered to them. Whatever she had said, it had united them in quiet defiance. She needed answers. The station's information center was quiet, save for the hum of holoscreens displaying data from across the galaxy. Lurvana walked in, her steps light but purposeful. She selected a terminal and accessed the station's public archives. Human history, she murmured, searching for relevant files. A vast collection of records appeared. Wars, discoveries, struggles, and triumphs. Lurvana skimmed through them, expecting to find the usual patterns of an ambitious but fragile species. But as she read, something unexpected happened. She stopped seeing humans as just another species. She started seeing stories. Stories of explorers who braved the unknown, knowing they might never return. Stories of soldiers who fought against impossible odds and won. Stories of scientists who worked tirelessly to save their people from deadly diseases, pushing forward even when hope seemed lost. Again and again, humans faced challenges greater than themselves. And again, they refused to give up. She came across an old quote from a human leader, one spoken long before they had even reached the stars. The only thing stronger than fear is the will to overcome it. Lurvana leaned back, her chest feeling tight. She finally understood. Her words in the Grand Hall had not just been an insult. They had been a denial of everything humans valued about themselves. Strength to them was not about power or size. It was about will, endurance, the ability to rise after every fall. No wonder Sam had looked at her with such anger. No wonder the humans had turned away. She closed the records and exhaled slowly. She had made a mistake. Lurvana found Sam in the lower levels of the station, where maintenance crews worked to keep the systems running. He was alone, repairing a damaged console with steady hands. His face was calm, but there was a hardness in his eyes, a quiet distance that had not been there before. She hesitated, then stepped forward. Sam. He didn't look up. What do you want, Lady Lurvana? His tone was polite, but cold. She took a breath. Apologizing was not something she did often, but this was necessary. I'd wish to understand, she said carefully. I believe I misjudged your people. Sam paused in his work, then finally looked at her. Yeah. What gave it away? His voice held no humor. Lurvana felt a pang of discomfort. I have read your history. I see now that humans measure strength differently than we do. Sam studied her for a long moment, then stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. Strength isn't just about muscles or weapons, he said. It's about pushing forward when everything tells you to stop. It's about standing up when you have every reason to fall. That's what you don't understand. Sam sighed, shaking his head. No, you don't, he said. Not yet. Before she could respond, a loud alarm blared through the station. The lights flickered, and a mechanical voice echoed through the halls. Warning: reactor malfunction detected. Critical systems at risk. Sam's expression changed instantly. The coldness in his eyes vanished, replaced by sharp focus. No time for this, he muttered. He grabbed his toolkit and ran toward the emergency lifts. Lurvana hesitated for only a second before following him. She still had much to learn about humans, and she was about to see their strength firsthand. The station's emergency sirens blared through the halls, a constant reminder of the growing crisis. Red warning lights flashed along the walls as crew members rushed to their assigned stations. The mechanical voice of the station's AI repeated its warning. Warning: reactor malfunction detected. Critical systems at risk. Sam sprinted down the corridor, gripping his toolkit tightly. His mind was already calculating the possible causes of the malfunction. Was it a cooling failure? A power surge? He needed answers fast. Behind him, Lurvana struggled to keep up. The sudden shift from quiet conversation to emergency action had caught her off guard, but she refused to fall behind. She had seen the look in Sam's eyes. Focus, determination, purpose. The humans around them moved with the same intensity. No panic, no hesitation, just action. Lurvana was used to seeing trained soldiers and elite engineers in her own society, but this was different. These were not warriors. These were engineers, technicians, and station crew, but they moved as if they had been preparing for this moment their whole lives. She had always thought humans were reckless, but now she saw the truth. They weren't reckless. They were prepared. They reached the reactor control room, where a team of human engineers was already at work. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and heated circuits. Smoke curled from the main control panel, and warning messages flashed across the monitors. A man in a grease-stained uniform turned as Sam entered. "Glad you're here," he said quickly. "We've got a coolant failure in the reactor's secondary core. If we don't fix it soon, we'll be dealing with a full meltdown." Sam nodded. "All right, what's our window?" 15 minutes before we hit critical levels." Lurvana's eyes widened. "That's not enough time. We need to evacuate." The engineers barely reacted to her words. One of them muttered, "Evacuation won't fix the problem." Sam shot Lurvana a sharp look. "We're not running. We fix this." She felt a chill at his words. He spoke as if failure was not an option. Sam grabbed a datapad and scanned the system diagnostics. "We need to manually vent the overheated plasma before the core reaches critical mass." He pointed to a control panel across the room. "That system is still operational, right?" "Barely," one of the engineers said. "We lost remote access to the vent controls." Sam exhaled. "Then someone has to go down to the reactor chamber and open the vents manually." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The reactor chamber was dangerously hot, and the radiation levels were rising. It was a death sentence for anyone who stayed too long. Before anyone could speak, Sam grabbed a protective suit and began strapping it on. "I'll go," he said. Lurvana stared at him. "You're going inside the reactor chamber." Sam didn't look up as he tightened his gloves. "Someone has to." "But it's too dangerous," Lurvana protested. Sam finally met her gaze. His expression was calm, but his eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite describe. "This is what we do," he said simply. Lurvana swallowed hard. For the first time, she understood what the older Vesari diplomat had meant. You spoke without understanding. She had called humans weak, but here they were, risking their lives without hesitation, not for glory, not for power, but because it needed to be done. Lurvana clenched her fists. She had come here to learn. If she turned away now, she would never truly understand. "I'm coming with you," she said. Sam frowned. "No, you're not." "I am," she insisted. "I might not be an engineer, but I can help. You said it yourself. We don't have much time." Sam hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Fine, but stay close and do exactly as I say." Lurvana nodded, steeling herself. This was her chance to prove that she wasn't just another noble speaking empty words. Inside the reactor chamber, the heat was unbearable. Even through the protective suit, Lurvana could feel the heavy air pressing against her skin. The entire room glowed with a deep orange light as overheated plasma churned through the reactor coils. Sam moved quickly, his hand steady as he activated the manual override system. Lurvana followed his instructions, helping where she could. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she worked, her body screaming for her to leave. "Almost there," Sam muttered. "Just a little more." A loud crack echoed through the chamber. A coolant pipe burst, sending a spray of steam into the air. The sudden pressure shift caused the metal platform beneath them to shake violently. Sam grabbed Lurvana's arm. "We need to move." They ran toward the final control panel. The last vent needed to be manually engaged. Sam reached for the lever. But then the ceiling groaned, and a heavy metal beam collapsed toward him. Lurvana acted before she could think. She shoved Sam aside, feeling the impact of the beam slam against her arm. Pain shot through her body as she hit the ground. "Lurvana!" Sam shouted. Ignoring the pain, she gritted her teeth and forced herself to stand. "Pull the lever," she gasped. Sam didn't waste a second. He grabbed the lever and pulled it down with all his strength. The vents opened. A rush of superheated air blasted through the chamber as the excess plasma was released. The reactor's warning alarms began to fade, the crisis finally under control. Sam turned back to Lurvana, who was holding her injured arm. His expression softened. "You didn't have to do that." Lurvana gave him a weak smile. "I guess I'm learning." For the first time, Sam looked at her not as an outsider, but as someone who had earned his respect. And Lurvana, through pain and exhaustion, finally understood what made humans truly strong. The reactor chamber was still hot, the air thick with the scent of burning metal. The alarms had stopped, and the lights flickered as the station's systems stabilized. Sam exhaled, pressing a hand against the wall to steady himself. The crisis was over, but the exhaustion in his muscles reminded him how close they had come to disaster. Lurvana stood beside him, clutching her injured arm. Her elegant robes were scorched, her silver skin smeared with soot. She had never felt this drained before, both physically and mentally. Sam looked at her. "You all right?" She nodded, though pain still burned in her arm. "I'll survive." A smirk crossed Sam's face. "Good. Then let's get out of here before we actually melt." He offered his arm to help her walk, but Lurvana hesitated before taking it. She was not used to accepting help, especially from a human. And yet, after everything that had happened, it felt right. Together, they left the chamber, stepping into the cooler hallways of the station. The other engineers were waiting outside, their faces tense. When Sam and Lurvana emerged, a wave of relief passed through the group. "Dan, Sam," one of them said, shaking his head. "I thought we lost you for a second." Sam grinned. "You should know by now. It takes more than a reactor meltdown to get rid of me." A few chuckles spread through the team, but then their eyes shifted to Lurvana. The silence returned. She felt their stares, some curious, some surprised. She knew what they were thinking. A Veseri noblewoman, standing among engineers, covered in dirt and sweat. It was not a sight they expected. One of the older engineers finally broke the silence. "You helped." Lurvana straightened her posture, ignoring the pain in her arm. "Yes." The man studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod of approval. "Not bad." It was a simple statement, but Lurvana felt its weight. It was not polite diplomacy. It was not empty flattery. It was recognition. She had earned something today. Sam glanced at her. Come on. Let's get that arm looked at. In the station's medical bay, a human doctor tended to Lurvana's injury. The wound was not serious, but the bruising would take time to heal. As she sat on the medical bed, Sam leaned against the wall, watching her. You really didn't have to push me out of the way, he said after a moment. Lurvana sighed. You wouldn't have made it in time. Sam smirked. Yeah, I know. But still, not many people would have done that. She met his gaze. Then maybe you have misjudged me as much as I misjudged you. Sam raised an eyebrow. Maybe. A comfortable silence settled between them. After a few minutes, Lurvana spoke again. Back in the reactor chamber, you didn't hesitate, even when you knew it could cost you your life. Sam's expression turned serious. That's just what we do. Lurvana frowned. But why? Why do humans always throw themselves into danger, even when they have other options? Sam was quiet for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Then he said, because someone has to. Lurvana tilted her head. Explain. Sam sighed. Look, humans aren't the strongest species out there. We aren't the smartest. We don't live the longest. But we don't stop. We don't turn away just because something is hard or dangerous. If something needs to be done, we do it, even if it means stepping into fire. He crossed his arms. You asked why I didn't hesitate. Because I knew if I didn't act, people would die. And I'd rather take the risk than live knowing I did nothing. Lurvana studied him, her mind racing. She had always thought of strength as something measurable. Physical power, intelligence, advanced technology. But Sam's words made her realize that true strength was something else entirely. It was the willingness to stand in the fire, to face the impossible, to refuse to break. And humans, they carried that strength in every step they took. Lurvana exhaled slowly. I think I understand now. Sam chuckled. Took you long enough. She rolled her eyes. Don't get ahead of yourself, human. A grin spread across Sam's face. Too late. Later that day, Lurvana walked through the station, lost in thought. The way humans moved, the way they spoke, it all made sense to her now. They were not reckless. They were not weak. They were resilient. And that was a strength far greater than anything she had ever known. As she passed by a group of humans, she noticed something different. The way they looked at her. Not with curiosity, not with amusement, but with respect. And for the first time in her life, Lurvana felt truly seen. Lurvana sat in the quiet of her guest quarters, her injured arm resting in a support sling. The station outside the window was calm again, its metal hull reflecting the distant stars. The emergency had passed, but something inside her still felt unsettled. She had spent years studying different species, believing she understood their strengths and weaknesses. Yet in a single day, humans had shattered everything she thought she knew. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Enter, she called. The door slid open, and Sam stepped in, holding a steaming cup in his hands. Thought you could use something warm, he said, setting it on the table. Lurvana glanced at the cup. What is it? Tea, Sam said with a shrug. Good for pain, good for thinking. She hesitated before picking it up. The warmth seeped through her fingers, comforting in a way she hadn't expected. She took a small sip, surprised by the smooth, slightly bitter taste. Sam sat down across from her. You've been quiet. Lurvana placed the cup down. I have been thinking. Sam smirked. Dangerous habit. She ignored his teasing. I have spent my life believing that strength came from power, from control. But today, I saw something different. You humans, you don't seek control. You don't hesitate to risk yourselves. And not for personal gain, but simply because it is necessary. Sam leaned back, listening. Lurvana met his gaze. Why? Sam exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. You really want to know? Yes. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. Because we don't know how to stop. Lurvana frowned. That is not an answer. Sam chuckled. No, it really is. He tapped his fingers against the table. Humans are stubborn. We don't like being told something is impossible. We don't like losing. And most of all, we don't like watching others suffer when we can do something about it. Lurvana listened carefully as he continued. We've been the underdogs for most of our history. We fought wars, survived disasters, rebuilt our world more times than I can count. Every time, we got back up. And every time, people asked us the same thing you're asking me now. Why do you keep fighting? He shook his head. The truth is, we don't know any other way to live. Lurvana considered his words. It is admirable, but reckless. Sam smirked. Maybe. But if we weren't reckless, we wouldn't be here. Lurvana sighed. I still do not understand how your people have survived for so long. Sam grinned. Because we refuse to stay down. She took another sip of tea, thinking. Sam watched her for a moment before standing up. You should rest. Lurvana glanced at him. Sam. He stopped at the door. She hesitated before speaking. Thank you. For a moment, he looked almost surprised. Then he smiled. Any time. The door closed behind him, leaving Lurvana alone with her thoughts. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if strength was not what she had always believed it to be. Lurvana walked through the station corridors, her injured arm still sore, but no longer a concern. The human engineers greeted her with polite nods, not just out of respect for her title, but because she had earned it. She had never cared much for approval, yet she found herself standing a little straighter. Humans did not respect words, they respected actions. And now, they respected her. As she approached the command center, the doors slid open, revealing a large room filled with holographic displays and workstations. At the center stood Captain Reynolds, the station's commanding officer, deep in conversation with his crew. Sam was beside him, arms crossed, listening intently. Lurvana stepped forward, and the discussion quieted slightly. Reynolds turned toward her. Ah, Ambassador. Good timing. Lurvana raised an eyebrow. For what? Reynolds gestured to a holographic display, showing a small cargo vessel drifting near the station. We picked up a distress signal from a nearby ship. Their engines failed, and they're stuck. Sam sighed. Not just stuck. Their power core is unstable. If it overloads, it'll take them, and possibly part of this station, with it. Lurvana frowned. What do they need? Reynolds folded his arms, an engineer to manually stabilize the core. Lurvana immediately knew what that meant. Someone had to go over there and risk their life. Again. She glanced at Sam, already guessing what he was about to say. I'll do it, he said. Reynolds sighed but didn't argue. It was clear this wasn't the first time Sam had volunteered for something dangerous. Lurvana clenched her fists. Again. Humans always threw themselves into fire without hesitation. But this time, she would not just stand and watch. I'm coming too, she said. Sam blinked. Wait, what? Reynolds looked surprised. Ambassador, that's not necessary. She lifted her chin. I am not just an ambassador anymore. I have seen how you humans act. And I cannot understand unless I experience it myself. Sam hesitated. Then he smirked. All right, but if you throw yourself in front of danger again, I'm gonna start thinking you actually like this. Lurvana rolled her eyes. Just try to keep up, human. Inside the docking bay, Sam and Lurvana suited up for the mission. The cargo ship was in bad shape, barely maintaining orbit. If they didn't stabilize its power core in time, it would either explode or crash into the station. Lurvana's heart pounded as they stepped onto the docking bridge connecting the two vessels. The ship's interior was dark, filled with flickering emergency lights and the scent of burning circuits. Sam led the way, checking a small scanner. Cores in the lower deck. Let's move fast. They reached the control room, where warning messages flashed across the panels. The power core hummed dangerously, its energy levels fluctuating. Lurvana took a deep breath. Tell me what to do. Sam handed her a tool. Hold this steady while I recalibrate the output levels. She followed his instructions carefully. Despite the tension, she found herself focused, not on fear, but on the task. Minutes passed. The core stabilized slightly, but a warning beeped. A final safety mechanism had failed. We need to activate the failsafe manually, Sam muttered. Lurvana looked at the console. Where is it? Sam's expression darkened. Behind that panel, inside the coolant vent. Lurvana's stomach dropped. The vent filled with superheated gas. Yeah, that one. She stared at him. And you were just going to jump in there, weren't you? Sam shrugged. Well, yeah. Lurvana exhaled sharply. Humans, always running into danger without thinking. But now she understood why. She grabbed a protective glove from the toolkit. Then let's do it together. Sam grinned. Now you're thinking like a human. Lurvana rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide the small smile forming on her lips. Together, they approached the panel. Together, they would fix this. The air inside the cargo ship was thick with heat, the hum of the unstable power core growing louder with every second. Lurvana could feel sweat forming on her forehead, but she ignored it. There was no time to hesitate. Sam pried open the vent panel, revealing the coolant system. A blast of superheated steam hissed out, forcing them to step back. Lurvana narrowed her eyes. We go in there, and we risk serious burns. Sam adjusted his protective gloves. Yeah, but if we don't, the whole ship is gonna blow. And if that happens, it'll take part of the station with it. Lurvana clenched her fists. She had studied countless species, learned their strengths and weaknesses. But now, she was standing at the edge of true danger, not as an observer, but as a participant. She looked at Sam. Let's finish this. He grinned. That's the spirit. Together, they crouched near the vent. Inside, they could see the failsafe control, a small flickering lever covered in thick layers of frost and steam. It was within reach, but the temperature inside the vent was rising fast. Sam checked his scanner. We have about 2 minutes before the core reaches critical levels. After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Lurvana nodded. I will go in. Sam blinked. Wait, what? She adjusted her gloves. Your suit is more damaged than mine. You have taken more heat already. If you go in, you might not make it out in time. Sam scowled. And you think you will? Lurvana smirked. You humans do not have a monopoly on bravery. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, Lurvana lunged forward, reaching into the vent. The heat was unbearable. Even with protection, she could feel it burning against her skin. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to pull back, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself to continue. She grabbed the lever. It was frozen in place. Her hands trembled as she applied more force. The metal burned against her gloves, but she didn't stop. Come on, she whispered. The ship trembled. The alarm blared louder. Sam's voice came through her earpiece. You have 10 seconds before the vent floods with steam again. You need to move. Lurvana closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then, with all the strength she had, she pulled. The lever snapped into place. A deep hiss filled the chamber as the failsafe activated, releasing a burst of freezing coolant into the core. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, the humming stopped. The alarm lights flickered and went dark. The ship's systems stabilized. Lurvana fell backward, gasping for air. Sam caught her before she hit the floor. You good? He asked, his voice tight with concern. Lurvana exhaled, her body still shaking, but a slow smile crossed her lips. Yes. Sam grinned. Remind me not to argue with you next time. She smirked. There will be a next time. Of course. You're practically an honorary human now. Lurvana chuckled. It was a strange feeling. This warmth, this camaraderie. It was something she had never experienced among her own kind. For the first time in her life, she truly understood why humans were different. They didn't just survive. They stood together. And now, she was one of them. Lurvana leaned against the cold metal wall of the cargo ship, catching her breath. Her arm ached, her body was exhausted, but the mission was complete. The power core was stable, the ship and the station were safe. Sam sat beside her, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, that was fun. Lurvana shot him a tired glare. Your definition of fun is strange, human. He laughed. You get used to it. The emergency lights dimmed, and the ship's systems slowly powered back up. A voice crackled through their earpieces. This is Captain Reynolds. We're detecting stabilization in the core. Status report. Sam tapped his earpiece. We're alive. Mission success. Good work. We're sending a retrieval team. Sit tight. Lurvana sighed in relief, closing her eyes for a moment. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind only exhaustion. Sam glanced at her. So, what did you think? She opened one eye. Of what? He gestured vaguely around them. Of doing things the human way. Lurvana thought for a moment. It is illogical, reckless, full of unnecessary risk. Sam smirked. And she exhaled. And yet, it works. He chuckled. Took you long enough to admit it. Lurvana shook her head, but she was smiling. She would never fully understand humans, but maybe she didn't have to. Maybe all she needed to do was trust them. Back on the station, the docking bay was filled with crew members as Sam and Lurvana stepped off the retrieval shuttle. A few engineers clapped Sam on the shoulder, congratulating him. But to Lurvana's surprise, some of them also nodded to her. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. Captain Reynolds approached them, arms crossed. That was reckless. Sam grinned. You're welcome. Reynolds sighed, shaking his head. Then he turned to Lurvana. You didn't have to go with him. Lurvana met his gaze. Yes, I did. Reynolds studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he extended a hand. She hesitated before shaking it. Welcome to the team, he said simply. Something inside Lurvana shifted. She had spent her whole life believing that status, power, and control defined a person's worth. But these humans, they valued something different. Loyalty, trust, the willingness to stand by each other, no matter the cost. And for the first time, Lurvana felt like she truly belonged. Sam nudged her. Not bad for a first mission, huh? She smirked. Next time, I choose the mission. Sam laughed. Deal. As she walked through the station, surrounded by humans, Lurvana realized something. She was no longer just an observer. She was one of them. And she wouldn't have it any other way. Lurvana stood on the observation deck of the station, gazing at the vastness of space. The stars stretched endlessly before her, but for the first time, she wasn't looking for answers in them. She had already found what she was looking for. Behind her, the doors slid open. She didn't turn. She already knew who it was. Sam walked up beside her, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed her one. Figured you'd be here. Lurvana took the cup with a nod. It is quiet here. Sam leaned against the railing. Yeah, it's nice to just be sometimes. She took a slow sip of the tea, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers. It had become a familiar comfort, much like the humans themselves. A comfortable silence stretched between them before Sam finally spoke. So, what now? Lurvana exhaled, watching the stars. I do not know. Sam smirked. That's a first. She gave him a look, but there was no real annoyance behind it. After a moment, she said, I was sent here to study humans, To learn your ways and report back to my people. Sam nodded. And now? She hesitated. Then, softly, she admitted, now, I do not think I'd want to leave. Sam grinned. Well, that's good, because I think the captain wants you to stay. Lurvana raised an eyebrow. As an ambassador? Sam shook his head. As part of the crew. Her fingers tightened around the teacup. You would trust me. After everything. Sam chuckled. You literally saved the station. I'd say you earned it. She looked at him. Humans were strange, illogical, reckless, and yet they had accepted her in a way her own people never had. For a long time, she had believed strength came from power, from control. But humans had shown her another kind of strength, the kind that came from standing together, from trust, from never giving up. And she wanted to be part of that. She turned back to the stars. Then I accept. Sam raised his cup in a small toast. Welcome to the team, partner. Lurvana clinked her cup against his. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just watching a story unfold. She was part of it. And it was only the beginning. The end.